Vanita, thank you so much for doing this. We really appreciate your help on the project.
Sure. Happy to be here.
Let me get started with a basic question, which is what makes something a civil rights issue?
Well, I think civil rights means a lot of different things to different people, but in this country, it means that even the most marginalized and vulnerable populations in our midst are entitled to a set of rights enshrined in the Constitution. And sometimes people can refer to it as, limited just to this notion of what are in the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. And other times it is a broader endeavor about ensuring that everyone has the ability to participate and experience and live life to the fullest here in this country. And so I think it depends on where you are situated, but a lot of times the fight for civil rights has involved a struggle to ensure that the most marginalized and vulnerable people in our midst have full access to all of the rights and benefits and protections that our law affords.
With that as the definition, what seem to you to be the most pressing civil rights issues right now in the United States?
Right now, I think that we are seeing an assault on a number of civil rights and across communities, and led by this administration. And so, a lot of the things that I think people have taken for granted are currently quite vulnerable. Things from LGBT rights, we've seen tremendous movement in this country around ensuring the dignity of LGBT people in our midst. That is currently kind of under attack. The Trump administration has been enacting policies that are giving people the license to discriminate against LGBT folks in the name of religion. And there's a big important case going to the Supreme Court. The area of voting rights has been one that has been very vulnerable as well. After the United States Supreme Court in 2013 gutted the heart of the Voting Rights Act in a decision known as Shelby County versus Holder, civil rights advocates have been trying to use every other tool at their disposal to ensure the protection of people's rights at the polling places, ensuring that obstacles are removed, that voter suppression laws are challenged in court, trying to ensure that when there is the right to vote, that people actually exercise that right to vote. And so this is a big area that I think is of great concern to so many of us. The area of criminal justice reform, there's been amazing momentum over the last 10 plus years, right, left, bipartisan momentum to reverse what was decades of really draconian sentencing policies, policies that resulted in the criminalization of everything from school discipline to mental illness to substance use disorders and the like. And right now here in Washington, that progress is being challenged. But what's been really gratifying is that all over the country, there is such amazing momentum at the local and state level to ensure and to work towards a criminal justice system that is fair and humane. And so hopefully that momentum won't stop. But the message that's coming out of this Justice Department here in Washington is certainly trying to send a very different message. And that's what a lot of us are fighting back against. And then there's just a broader attack on inclusion and diversity, which has really been the foundation of our country. It's been a long struggle to have inclusion and equal dignity for all communities. But we saw in the 2000 election, candidates referring to Mexicans as rapists, challenging judges as being biased because of their ethnic origin, mocking people with disabilities, kind of a level of rhetoric that was really disconcerting, to say the very least. And I think, after things like the travel ban and other policies from this year, kind of culminating in the very painful events in Charlottesville in August, where the president refused to unequivocally denounce white supremacy and white supremacists, several of whom were marching in the president's name. That was just a real watershed moment for this country and for people to begin to really understand what was at stake, that the values of inclusion and diversity and fairness are ones that have defined us, that right now, as polarized as we are, we need to come together to defend and fight for those values. And so I think the broader mission is one that we need to be standing up for every day.
So let me ask you this. When you think about the work that's going on right now in 2017 and you compare it to the work in, say, 1960, 1964, 1965, how do you think about it? Are the issues the same or different? Why are they the same or different?
In a lot of ways, the animating principles are the same, but because it's the push for inclusion and equal dignity and equal rights. But I think, look, I think it would be irresponsible for us to not recognize that there has been significant progress from the 1960s and from, the days of Jim Crow. But yet there are a lot of ways in which the problems have changed and they remain deeply entrenched. We still continue to have very segregated schools. We continue to be faced with racial discrimination in housing. We continue to be faced with anti-LGBT laws. Women's bodies continue to be regulated by the government in various places. So there's, any number of issues. We continue to have really egregious problems for voting among African Americans and Latino communities. And so, but I think the needle has moved a little bit, but we are also seeing new problems. The criminal justice system was not nearly the size that it is today. In the 1960s, it was a fraction of what it was today. And we've seen this buildup since the 1970s in our criminal justice system. And it's a new kind of, as Michelle Alexander said, it's kind of the new face of Jim Crow, and we have a lot of work to do there. So I think the root of these problems remains the same. It remains this kind of principle of fight of like some groups feeling like they are losing control of what this country is becoming and trying to find different policy ways to preserve the status quo. Some call it a kind of white nationalist agenda. I think when you had Steve Bannon and Sebastian Gorka in the White House, you had Stephen Miller in the White House, Jeff Sessions at the Justice Department pushing what is fundamentally an anti-immigrant agenda, an agenda that is hurtful and harmful to people of color. There are ways in which that is very resonant of our history, and that's why we always have to be vigilant about our history. But we have to also recognize where there's been progress and continue to fight the fights that we are experiencing today to pursue a more kind of just and equal America.
Let me follow up on that point about immigrants, because it does feel like right now immigration is the front lines of the civil rights struggle in a way that it hasn't felt, at least in my lifetime, before, or it hasn't felt that way to me. Does it seem to you that that's different? And how does the civil rights movement embrace immigration as a civil rights issue? What does that look like? And are there any downsides to thinking about immigration as a civil rights issue?
I mean, I don't think we have the luxury of deciding whether immigration and immigrants' rights is or is not a civil rights issue. I think the fact of the matter is, if you believe that this country should be inclusive, should be fair, and you have to believe in an America that provides immigrants with the rights that are enshrined in our Constitution. The Constitution doesn't just articulate rights for U.S. citizens. It includes everyone in our borders. And there are laws and there's jurisprudence that guides these questions. And so I think this is a profoundly anti-immigrant administration. And in many ways, it's kind of the last gasp of people who are struggling to fight or struggling against a more diverse and inclusive America. And so that is a deep problem that we are facing. But it's deeply connected to other broader issues of racial justice. And it's why for the leadership conference, which really is a big tent, it includes groups like Unidos US and MALDEF. It includes groups of the NAACP and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. For us, it's really important that we are organizing across organizations, across issues, across our communities to act in solidarity for a more inclusive America. Because when Jeff Sessions announced the rescission of DACA, he used very nativist language, very nativist rationale for, pitting American workers against immigrants. And it could be a very divisive wedge issue, but you're seeing African American leaders and racial justice leaders saying, no, we're not going to stand for it. This is all an attack on one of us, is an attack on all of us. And so I think the demographics of this country are changing, like it or not. And we are inherently a country of immigrants, kind of founded, after slavery, and we've got a whole set of legacies to deal with. And so I just think the organizing, kind of the Black-brown organizing, the multiracial organizing that's happening around these issues is really, really vital because we can't afford to have our communities pitted against each other.
Tell me about the civil rights parts of the healthcare reform struggle. Is that something that the Leadership Conference is involved in? And what do you think about the civil rights side of that issue?
We have been really involved in the struggle for healthcare. I mean, in some ways, you don't have healthcare, you don't have housing, you don't have schools. Like, all of this prevents you from being able to live in the world and in this country in a fulsome way. And so the Leadership Conference was very involved in the Protect Our Care Coalition, specifically fighting to save Medicaid. Medicaid has a deep impact in low-income communities and in communities of color, and on women. And so for us, it was the kind of attacks and the continuous attacks, they aren't over yet, on the Affordable Care Act, have presented an important civil rights issue where we've been fighting back in solidarity with other groups to basically save basic health care for low-income folks and folks of color, as I said, and for women. And so it was kind of a no-brainer for us, given how devastating it would be for there to be severe cutbacks on Medicaid and what the kind of intention and policy rubric was for around the Affordable Care Act.
Okay, thanks so much. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you.